Welcome to the Trill Tuesday question and responses for the upper extremity. This is going to be exciting. Question 1 from Neil Henderson 3630. Hey doc, how would you differentiate between a nerve issue, artery, or blood issue? That's really clear. Okay, when you're looking at artery, you're looking at either swelling because the blood's going in and can't flow out, or cold because the blood can't flow down. A nerve is going to be electrical burning, sharp, or shooting. Tingling is also important. So all of these are very, very easy to distinguish. It's interesting that when you're talking the upper extremity, both the blood supply and nerve supply have to do with the cervical spine. Because if the head is forward or laterally deviated, you can impinge the blood vessels coming from the thoracic outlet. So that's going to be arterial issues. You can also have direct impingement, where there could be a subluxation of the clavicle, also compressing the arterial supply. The nerves that supply the shoulder come out of the cervical spine, the lower cervical spine. 5, 6, 7, C8, T1, everything. So if there's a subluxation or a structural impingement of that, that's also going to do it. You can also have peripheral impingement. You can have impingement at the elbow leading to nerves that are compromised distal. So electrical burning, sharp shooting, tingling, those are all nerve issues. Swelling or cold, those are arterial issues. Question 2 from Palm Resner 6158. I inflamed my right elbow about 16 years ago, and it is no longer straightened out all the way. Movements that involve twisting my wrist, push-ups, lifting heavy objects, cause it to get so inflamed that it hurts even to lift my arm. Do you have any suggestions on how to correct this? Absolutely. When you look at the elbow, you've got two bones here. One is a hinge, that's the ulnar. Now, since most people are flexing their hands more than they're extending them, that typically subluxates that ulnar bone into the medial aspect or towards the midline of the body. And that can cause impingement, leading to golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, a number of different things, but also it can affect the entire hand. Now, the muscle imbalance, you've got muscles on the front of the hand called flexors, and muscles on the back of the forearm called extensors. Now, the strength ratio should be a 5-4. Now, typically in cervical issues where there's a problem applying or supplying that area, there's going to be a muscle imbalance. And usually it is the flexors that are stronger, and that's going to subluxate the ulnar. But the turning is located at the radius. And that radius is also where the biceps attaches to. So you're looking at subluxations of the ulnar and radius. And the radius, that biceps is responsible for flexing. And if the ulnar is out and the radius out, obviously that elbow will not straighten. So you have got, for sure, get a full x-ray of the cervical, thoracic spine, have a qualified doctor check. And there's a very, very simple muscle test to test the triceps. And that's going to be checking the flexor epicondyle by flexing your hand, extending the hand. That's going to check the extensor epicondyle, which is where the radius is. And you're going to see a difference or a change in that strength. And we're going to be covering this in great detail when we cover the forearm. But you've got to look at the cervical spine, thoracic spine, and you're going to have ulnar and for sure radial subluxations. You fix that and you're going to be hunky-dory. You can also gap the elbow. There's a lot of different exercises we can do to open up that ulnar joint, because that is the hinge that's responsible for straightening. But flexion, you are looking at for sure. Man, that radius is going to be a big issue, and you will fix it. There's no way to fix it, not naturally. Surgery ain't going to fix this one. Question 3 from Moneski 1. What could numb fingers while sleeping be caused by? Two different areas in that. One, if your arm is tucked up like this and you're sleeping, you can literally compress those nerves in that arm, in that forearm. And that's, or if the hand's curled up, that can also compromise the nerves, particularly if it's left like this for a while. And the second area is going to be the cervical spine. So if you're sleeping on a pillow that's too short, that can compromise it. If you're sleeping on a pillow that's too big, that can compromise it. The head should be in a neutral position when you're sleeping on your side. but there's going to be a cervical issue, elbow issue, or wrist issue. And check those areas and you will find the problem. Question 4 from an Arky mom. I would like to know about frozen shoulders, please. Both mine have frozen. The right one is recovered, but the left one is still restricted movement for nearly 2 years. Okay, this is totally cool. Frozen shoulder has very little to do with the shoulder. It has everything to do with the cervical spine, thoracic spine, and the labrum. Okay, so when you're looking at this, you've got the humerus that's sucked into this cup called the labrum. Now, when you see this, because I did human dissection for years, the labrum feels like warm Tupperware that you microwaved. Okay, so it's thick. It looks almost like plastic. But what happens is, if you damage the rotator cuff, and the rotator cuff, their job is to suck that head of the humerus in that socket. If any of those muscles get weak, the socket, the humerus, doesn't fall out of the socket. It falls up because you've got this massive deltoid always pulling up. So in normal shoulder motion, the shoulder should abduct or go away from your body like this. What you're going to see in frozen shoulder is it goes up and then out. Okay, so when it goes up, that has to do with all of the muscles guarding, with a distorted labrum, which means the mechanoreceptors, the sensors inside of that joint, aren't firing the muscles off correctly. So you've got a cervical spine issue and a distorted labrum. Now, luckily, that labrum can be reshaped. And you'll see what we recommend is once we get the cervical spine corrected or starting to be corrected, so we restore the nerve supply, we get a great weight and drop it down and then move your hand from the butt to the belly back and forth. The palm has got to be forward, and you'll see this in our shoulder rehab videos, but this is going to start to reshape that labrum. The thing you don't want to do with a frozen shoulder is, remember, that labrum, that socket, normal abduction, frozen shoulder abduction. Okay, so when it goes up, it doesn't have that full range of motion, so it's not going to be moving correctly, and all the muscles around there are going to be guarding. So you have to reform that socket. Do not stretch and try and open up that joint. You're further distorting that labrum. So the cause of the frozen shoulder is going to be cervical spine and distorted labrum, and then that's going to change the joint mechanoreceptor and change how the muscles fire off. You fix that, and it will not take 2 years. You're going to be able to correct that in a very short time. It usually takes me between a couple of days to a couple of weeks to correct a frozen shoulder. It shouldn't be that long of an issue. Question 5 from Adrienne Conroy 4208. Hello, Dr. B. I have constant ache in my right shoulder, front and down the back of my forearm and elbow into my thumb and index and third finger. Brilliant. Thumb, index, and third finger has to do with C5, C6, C7, and possibly even T8. And she goes on to state, I have bulging disc at C3, C4, C5, C6, and C7. No curve in my neck, osteoporosis of the spine according to the x-ray. I fell back in 2021, and since then, this has been going on. I've had numerous MRIs, full back x-ray, physiotherapy, and acupuncture. I would love to be able to get to your clinic, but I'm in Ireland. Any thoughts or recommendations would be greatly appreciated. Keep up your work. I love listening to your podcast and videos. God bless you, my dear. Also, forgot to say an incidental finding of a lesion on my cerebellum 2 years ago during an MRI for the spine. I also had a couple of chiropractic visits. Do you know any chiropractors in Ireland? No, I do not know any chiropractors in Ireland. And the disc bulges were seen on an MRI. Now, an MRI is done when you're laying flat, face up in the supine position. And gravity is going to be pushing down and the table's pushing up. With a loss of curve, that's going to make these disc bulges appear. What I would recommend, because physical therapy isn't going to work, it's not a muscle issue. Acupuncture isn't going to work because it's not going to restore the curve of the spine. So, and you're describing exactly lower cervical dysfunction, and this has to do with the loss of curve. That curve in the neck is called the arc of life. Number one, you got to get a full set of x-rays, and I'm talking cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spine, because if you're missing the curve in the lumbar, the lordosis, your body's going to be leaning forward, and that's going to put the head forward. With loss of curve in the neck, the head's already forward. And if this has been like this for a while, you're looking at degeneration. Now, the osteoporosis has more to do with acidic blood than it does with the bones. The bones are going to be secondary because you've got respiration, perspiration, pooping and peeping. And if you have a defect in those, like, one poop a day, if you're lucky, poor sleep patterns, the blood is going to become acidic, and the body's going to go to the bone bank to withdraw calcium to alkalinize the system. So look at osteoporosis as a defense by maintaining your body's pH, because it's got to be 7.35 to 7.45. If it goes up a tenth of a point, one or the other, you're not going to live. So the body is going to go to that bone to cannibalize it, to get that positive ion, that calcium, to alkalinize the system. So you have to get to a corrective chiropractor. This means the guy's going to take a static x-ray and that spine to take a stress x-ray to see what's moving and what's not moving. And then he's going to do a series of adjustments. We typically, on a case like this, it's more than likely grade 2, grade 3 arthritis. At 30 adjustments, we're going to go in and do a second x-ray to document that we're fixing the problem. So you got to identify the problem, do a series of adjustments, take another x-ray, and identify that you're fixing the problem. We're talking just really basic stuff. And the cerebellum, when you look at the brain is in a case. Okay, and the brain creates its own food called cerebrospinal fluid. That fluid's produced inside the middle of the brain called the choroid plexus, and it flows through these ventricles down around and drains through the cervical spine. With the loss of curve, forward head carriage, that pressure builds up, and that pressure can actually affect the cerebellum, which is right at the big hole. It's called foramen magnum, and that could put pressure on it, particularly on an MRI. It's going to say that there is pressure on the cerebellum. So this is something that you have got to get corrected immediately. To get my contact info, I'll help with any chiropractor you find that wants to learn how to restore the curve in the neck, and you will get better. But this is a big deal. You've got to get this thing addressed right away. You've got to get that curve back in the neck. Look at all of our adjusting videos. Tell the chiropractor about that, but I'll walk them through. But we got to start with getting static and stress x-rays to find out if those joints are fused, if they're still mobile, how much we can restore that curve, and make sure that the thoracic spine isn't a contributing factor. This is why you've got to look at the entire spine. Like I said, you got to look at the lumbar spine. If you're missing the lordotic curve, that also could be a contributing factor. And you will get better, absolutely. Now, if your question wasn't answered in this video, please visit the Dr. B VIP site, because then I can speak a lot more freely. And God bless you all. Stay healthy, my friends.